Thank you. Mr. Kara-Murza, is it possible to answer a question in... Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Ina Baltes. I'm working for ZDF German television. Mr. Kara-Murza, is it possible to say a few sentences in English? Because it's for us it's easier with the translation. Putin, the legal procedure is that Mr. Putin had to give mercy to you, to free you, and did you sign something to plead guilty? That's the normal procedure you have to do? Did you sign something? And second question, do you think you will ever go back to Russia?
Okay, thanks for both questions. On your first question, I refer back to the words that I said in the introduction about Vladimir Bukovsky, the prominent Soviet-era dissident, writer, longtime prisoner of conscience, who wrote on his own exchange in December of 1976 at Zurich International Airport for Chilean Communist Party leader Luis Corvalán, that in our country, then in the Soviet Union, they can't arrest you and they can't release you according to the law. And unfortunately, in the half a century that ensued since then, the situation hasn't changed. You're absolutely right in suggesting that normal procedure requires that in order for a prisoner to be released, he or she has to petition the head of state, the president, for a pardon, and then that pardon decree is signed. Last Tuesday, and again, it feels surreal that we're only talking about days ago. It feels like it's been 3 years, but last Tuesday, the 23rd of July, I was suddenly taken from my cell by two prison officers, taken into an office under a big portrait of Mr. Putin. And on the desk, there was a blank piece of paper, a pen, and a prepared sort of example statement. And the senior officer invited me to sit down on the desk and write a petition according to the example. The example petition was addressed to Mr. Putin. It spoke of admitting guilt. It spoke of remorse for what I have done. First, honestly, I thought it was a joke. I just laughed at them when I saw it. But you know, the man didn't seem to have a very good sense of humor. He asked me, well, aren't you going to write it? I said, of course I'm not going to write it. Do you even know approximately who I am? I mean, you have internet, unlike me. You can go and check my bio. Of course I'm not going to write it. He continued to not get any humor. He said, well, why won't you write it? And I said, well, first of all, because I don't consider Mr. Putin to be a legitimate president of my country. I consider him to be a dictator, a usurper, and a murderer. And I'm not going to sign any petitions for mercy to him. But secondly, because obviously I'm not going to admit any guilt, because I'm not guilty of anything. And so for those two very obvious reasons, I'm not going to sign this ridiculous paper that they're asking me. So they asked me, I think, 5 times. I said no, so they led me back to my prison cell, but that wasn't the end of it. Because on Thursday, last Thursday, the 25th of July, the same 2 officers came in, took me back to the same prison office. This time gave me another piece of paper saying that our conversation 2 days before was recorded on a video camera, and that now I have to write an official explanation of why I said such things about our dear President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And I said, you know, as Mikhail Bulgakov, the great Russian writer, once wrote, it's easy and pleasant to tell the truth. I said, give me the pen, this time I will write. And so I put everything down on paper. I said that I consider Putin to be not a legitimate president, to be a dictator, a usurper, and a murderer, who is personally responsible for the murder of Boris Nemtsov, who is personally responsible for the murder of Alexei Navalny, who is personally responsible of the deaths of thousands of civilians, including children in Ukraine, including a recent bombing of a children's hospital in Kiev at the beginning of July, and that I'm not going to sign any petitions for mercy because I'm not guilty of anything, and that the criminals are those who are waging this war, not those who are speaking out against it, as all of us are. Signed it, put my name, put the date, and gave them the piece of paper. And then at 3 a.m. On night from Saturday to Sunday, I was woken up by the same 2 prison officers, and they had a really busy week last week. Suddenly told that I had 20 minutes to take all my stuff. A police convoy arrived, but they were dressed in civilian clothes. And then they took me into the airport, handcuffed, on a plane to Moscow, to Lefortovo, the FSB prison. And I have to say that after spending a straight year in solitary confinement, I spent a year out of 2.5 years in solitary confinement. I wasn't sure I was still able to speak in any language. It was something out of this world to suddenly, be in the middle of an airport, busy with people, and I don't have enough words, again, in any language to express it. And then you know all the rest. It was Lefortovo. Nobody explained anything. We were all held in, of course, none of us knew that the other ones were there. And actually, at some point, I thought that I was just going to be let out and get shot. And we had a conversation yesterday with our colleagues on the bus, on the FSB bus, and then on the plane. And I wasn't alone in thinking that, because that was another option that was possible. In our country, anything's possible under this regime. But you know what happened in the end. And so, go back to Vladimir Bukovsky's words. In Russia, they cannot arrest you according to the law, and they cannot release you according to the law either. I didn't sign a petition for mercy or for pardon, but I was still pardoned, even though I didn't ask for it. As Ilya just said, according to the Russian Constitution, Article 61, it is expressly forbidden to expel Russian citizens from Russia without their consent. Nobody asked our consent, we never gave our consent, yet we're here. And by Russian law, you have to have a special foreign travel passport to cross the border. None of us have one. We just have our normal internal Russian passports that are not, you're not allowed to travel abroad with this. But we're sitting in Bonn, all of us with these passports. That's the first part of your question. And on the second part, each of us, there were 16 of us on the Russian side, prisoners, either political prisoners, Russian political prisoners, or foreign journalists, or German citizens who were part of the exchange from the Russian side. Each of us was accompanied by our personal FSB officer, who was sitting on the left side or on the right side, depending on the row, next to each prisoner on the plane. And my FSB officer, that's the correct expression. The moment our plane was taking off, he told me, "Look out the window, it's the last time you're seeing your motherland." And I turned to this guy and I laughed once again, and I said, "Look, I didn't know his name, I didn't know his rank, obviously. I didn't feel the need to inform us of all those things." I told him, "Look, man, I'm a historian by education. I don't only feel, I don't only believe, I know that I'll be back in my home country. And it'll be much quicker than you think." Пожалуйста.
Do you know anything about the selection process that was taking place, that you three happened to be on that list?
I can speak for myself. Colleagues speak for themselves, although I think you'll find our answers very similar. We do not know anything. I can tell you the moment. Okay, let me tell you first of all, I was certain I was going to die in Putin's prison. I did not believe I will ever see my wife again. I did not believe I'll ever see my family again. This feels really surreal. This feels like a film. I was certain I was going to die in Putin's prison. None of us knew until the last moment. I only realized that what this was yesterday morning when I was let out of the cell in Lefortovo, put on a bus, and the first person I saw there was my friend and colleague Andrei with his FSB guy, and the second person I saw was my friend and colleague Ilya with his FSB guy. And only then, and then I saw also Oleg Orlov from Memorial, Alsu Kurmasheva, the journalist from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and others, and only at that moment I realized what it actually was. So we didn't even know that an exchange was happening, let alone of, you know, what you're asking, how the selection worked and what the criteria were. And since arriving to Germany yesterday, we were all held in a quarantine in a medical facility for medical testing and evaluations. This is our first venture into the outside world. So we have absolutely no idea. And The only thing I do know is that this, I hope to know more, by the way, in the coming hours, perhaps in the coming days. But what I do know is that this never have happened, this never would have happened without the passionate, sustained, both public and private effort, with public and private commitment by governments, by organizations, and by individuals who have dedicated their time, their effort, and their hearts and souls to making sure that at least some, a very small part of us, a very small part of those hundreds, more than 1,000 people who are sitting in Putin's prisons for the crime of opposing war and opposing dictatorship have been let out. And I just want to second what Ilya Yashin said, that this is just a drop in the ocean, the exchange yesterday, because so many innocent people who've never committed a crime in their life are being held in torturous conditions, either physically or psychologically or both, in Putin's prisons for the only crime of speaking the truth, for the only crime of opposing the war, for the only crime of opposing a dictator. And it is my hope that governments, organizations, and passionate, committed individuals in the free world will not only continue to speak about the importance of human rights, about the importance of human life, about the importance of values, but will continue to act, will continue to take steps to make sure that more of those people who never should have spent a minute behind bars are free, as we are free today, thanks to all those countless amazing and passionate individuals.
Если можно, еще коротко и по-русски. Вы знаете, в любой колонии начальник — это